It is the early morning of June 6, 1944. The English Channel is rough, the sky is still dark, and a young American soldier is standing in a flat-bottomed boat called a Higgins craft, soaking wet, seasick, and about to run headfirst into one of the most heavily defended coastlines in history. He is a U.S. Army infantryman. He's probably 19 or 20 years old, and he is carrying somewhere between 60 and 90 pounds of gear on his body. Today, we are going through every single piece of kit an American infantryman carried onto the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, from the helmet on his head to the foot powder in his pack. This is the complete loadout. M1 Garand. If there was one weapon that defined the American infantryman in World War II, it was the M1 Garand. It was a semi-automatic rifle, which meant every pull of the trigger fired a round and automatically loaded the next one. That sounds basic today, but in 1944, most of the world was still handing their soldiers bolt-action rifles. The American soldier could fire 8 rounds as fast as he could squeeze the trigger. His German counterpart had to manually cycle the bolt between each shot. The Garand fired the powerful .30 caliber 30-06 cartridge from an 8-round on-block clip. The whole clip ejected with a distinctive metallic ping when the last round was fired. There are stories of soldiers in combat flinching at that sound because they worried it gave away their position. General George Patton called the M1 the greatest battle implement ever devised. It weighed about 9.5 pounds unloaded, was accurate well past 500 yards, and could also mount a bayonet for close quarters work. The standard basic load was around 96 rounds, spread across 12 clips, carried in a pair of cartridge belts worn around the waist. M1 Carbine. The M1 Carbine was a lighter, shorter alternative to the Garand, commonly carried by officers, radio operators, and soldiers. Already weighed down with specialized equipment, it fired a smaller .30 caliber cartridge from a 15-round magazine, trading stopping power and range for a significant reduction in weight. M1911 Pistol. The M1911 was the standard American service pistol, a .45 caliber semi-automatic that had been in service since the First World War. Officers, NCOs, and vehicle crews carried one as a sidearm with spare magazines in a pouch on the belt. M1 Bayonet. The M1 bayonet had a 10-inch blade that locked onto the end of the Garand via a collar mount. It served equally well as a close-quarters weapon, a utility knife, and a prying tool, and was carried in a scabbard on the belt when not mounted to the rifle. Grenades. The standard American grenade on D-Day was the Mark II, sometimes called the pineapple grenade because of the segmented cast-iron body. Inside was a charge of around 2 ounces of explosive with a fuse giving approximately 4 to 5 seconds after the pin was pulled and the handle released. Assault troops typically carried 2 to 4 grenades hooked to the front of their jackets or strapped to their gear. They were essential for clearing bunkers, trenches, and enclosed spaces where rifle fire was difficult or impossible. Waterproof muzzle cover. Before stepping off the landing craft, soldiers had a simple problem. How do you keep salt water and sand out of a rifle barrel during a wet beach assault? The most common solution was a rubber condom stretched over the muzzle, which could be fired straight through without removing it first. It cost nothing, weighed nothing, and kept the most important piece of equipment a soldier owned from jamming the moment he needed it most. Weapon Cleaning Kit. The M1 Garand was an excellent rifle, but sand and salt water on a Normandy beach was about the worst environment imaginable for any firearm. Every soldier carried a small cleaning kit containing a bore brush, a patch holder, cleaning rods, and a small bottle of oil, usually packed into a cloth roll that fit inside the stock or in the haversack. After the chaos of the landing, getting that rifle cleaned and functional again was one of the first things a soldier did when he found a moment of cover. M1 Helmet. The M1 steel helmet is one of the most recognizable objects from the entire Second World War. It had 2 parts, an outer steel shell and an inner liner with a web suspension system that kept the shell from sitting directly on the soldier's head, which actually improved protection by allowing some movement on impact. It weighed about 2.5 pounds and was excellent against shell fragments, which were responsible for the majority of casualties in the war. Many soldiers used the inner liner as a wash basin, a digging tool, or a cooking pot when the situation called for it. Some troops added mesh netting to the outside, where they could tuck in camouflage or foliage to break up the helmet's outline. Dog tags every. American soldier wore 2 oval aluminum identification tags on a chain around his neck, commonly called dog tags. They were stamped with his name, service number, blood type, and religious preference, and the 2-tag system meant one could stay with a wounded or killed soldier while the other went with the report. Simple, lightweight, and one of the most important pieces of equipment he carried. M1942, HBT uniform and combat boots. The American infantryman on D-Day was generally wearing herringbone twill cotton fatigues, which were durable but offered almost no warmth when soaking wet, which described every man who stepped off a Higgins craft. Many soldiers wore the M1943 field jacket over these, a layered system with large cargo pockets and a hood that rolled into the collar. The Army had also recently introduced the M1943 ankle boot paired with a canvas gaiter, moving away from the tall leather jackboot to save material. Spare socks and foot-powder trench foot was one of the most debilitating non-combat injuries of the war, caused by prolonged exposure to cold and wet conditions that broke down skin tissue until a soldier could barely walk. The Army's response was simple and direct. Keep your feet dry, change your socks, and use foot powder. Soldiers were issued foot powder and strongly encouraged to carry at least 1 spare pair of socks in their pack, even when stripping weight for the assault. M1928, haversack and full field pack. The M1928 haversack was the main pack system, a canvas bag worn on the upper back with space for the mess kit pouch and entrenching tool attached below and to the side. In theory, a soldier carried a full field pack with an overcoat, shelter half, and blanket roll. In practice, many soldiers going ashore on D-Day stripped down to the bare minimum, while others loaded up with so much extra ammunition and demolition equipment that they could barely stay above water when they stepped off the ramp. There are documented accounts of men drowning under the weight of their gear before they ever reached the sand. Entrenching tool. The M. 1943 folding entrenching tool was a short-handled folding shovel, and every soldier understood that the fastest way to survive artillery fire was to get underground. On the beaches of Normandy, where men were pinned under machine gun fire with nowhere to go, the ability to scrape even a shallow depression in the sand was the difference between living and dying. Wire cutters, assault engineers, and infantry soldiers frequently carried wire cutters for clearing the barbed wire obstacles threaded throughout the Atlantic Wall defenses. They were simple, heavy, and absolutely essential for the first waves hitting the beach. Rations. The K ration was the standard assault ration, designed for combat situations where there was no time or ability to heat food. It came in 3 separate boxes for breakfast, dinner, and supper, each compact enough to fit in a cargo pocket and might contain canned meat, compressed biscuits, a fruit bar, instant coffee, hard candy, a wooden spoon, and a few cigarettes. The food was dense and calorie-rich, but universally considered terrible by the men who ate it. One soldier later described it as something you would eat to stay alive and nothing more. The D ration was a separate emergency chocolate bar made by Hershey specifically for the military, deliberately formulated to taste bitter and unpleasant so soldiers would not eat it outside of genuine emergencies. Soldiers mostly hated it, but kept it anyway. The calorie count was the point, not the flavor. Mess utensils. Each soldier carried a basic mess kit, a folding metal pan with a handle that doubled as a plate, along with individual utensils, typically a spoon and a folding knife, packed in the meat can pouch on the back of the haversack. After a combat landing, there was rarely any hot food to eat anyway, but the kit came along regardless: water and medical. The soldier carried a single M1910 aluminum canteen holding about a quart of water with a metal cup nested around the base. 1 quart was not much for a man fighting under fear and physical exertion, and resupply on the first day was essentially 0. Soldiers were told to make it last. Each soldier carried a small first aid pouch on the belt, containing a wound dressing packet, and many had been given additional morphine syrettes before the landing for pain management if wounded. Soldiers were instructed to pin the used syrette to the collar of a wounded man so that medics would know a dose had already been given. Beyond the standard pouch, most soldiers tucked an extra bandage roll into a pocket or their pack because one dressing was not always enough and nobody wanted to find that out the hard way. Sulfa powder packets were also common. If you were hit, the doctrine was to sprinkle sulfa into the wound before applying the dressing to reduce the chance of infection. Penicillin was becoming more widely available to Allied forces by mid-1944, which was a genuine medical revolution that saved thousands of soldiers from wounds that would have been fatal in any earlier war. Hygiene and personal care. A soldier going into a prolonged campaign needed more than weapons and food, and the Army knew it. Each man carried a basic hygiene roll containing toilet paper, which sounds trivial until you spend 3 weeks in a field with none. The housewife kit was a small cloth sewing roll containing needles, thread, a few buttons, and safety pins, issued because a uniform that is falling apart is a real problem when there is no resupply. Soldiers also carried a small bar of soap, a razor, and whatever personal grooming items they had managed to fit. Gas mask. Like their German counterparts, every American soldier was issued a gas mask carried in a rubberized canvas bag, worn across the chest or on the hip. Chemical weapons were never deployed at Normandy, and many soldiers quietly left their masks behind as the campaign wore on without anyone enforcing the regulation. Personal items. Inside the pack or tucked into pockets were the things the Army never issued. The Bible was remarkably common. The Red Cross and military chaplains had distributed small pocket editions before embarkation, and many soldiers had brought their own from home. Beyond that, there were photographs, letters written but not yet mailed, lucky coins, playing cards, and pocket knives. The Army had also issued invasion currency, French francs printed by the Allies for use after the beachhead was secured. It was a strangely optimistic thing to be carrying onto a beach where people were actively trying to kill you. But it was in the pack anyway. The average American infantryman who hit the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944, was carrying somewhere between 60 and 90 pounds of gear, depending on his role and unit. He had been seasick for hours. He had likely not slept. The ramp of his landing craft dropped and he stepped into water that was sometimes chest deep under fire, with no cover and a long stretch of open beach in front of him. What gets studied most is the tactics, the command decisions, the weapon systems. What gets studied less is the individual man, 19 years old, weighed down with steel and canvas and bitter chocolate, a spare pair of socks, and a Bible somewhere in his pack. He did not have a choice about being there, but he went anyway, and the gear he carried helped him do the job.